What happens when a flight attendant, high on her own authority, decides to target a family just for the way they look? She called them troublemakers. She belittled them, harassed them, and tried to humiliate them in front of a packed plane. She thought she was the queen of the cabin, and they were just problems. But she made one catastrophic mistake. She never bothered to ask the father what he did for a living. And by the time she found out, it wasn't just her job on the line, it was her entire life. This is the story of how a single word of prejudice led to a fall from 35,000 feet without ever leaving the ground. The air in Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, ORD, was thick with the smell of stale coffee, jet fuel, and the collective anxiety of thousands of people trying to be somewhere else. It was a humid Tuesday in July, and the terminal for cross-country airlines flight 1282 to Washington, D.C., DCA, was a microcosm of contained chaos. The flight was delayed, a minor mechanical issue, the robotic voice announced, stretching a 45-minute wait into a grueling 2-hour ordeal. In the middle of this fray sat the Washington family. Dr. Elena Washington, a pediatric oncologist with a patience forged in the most harrowing of human circumstances, was trying to diffuse a sugar-fueled argument between her two children. Maya, 10, was precociously attempting to ignore her younger brother by burying her nose in a thick fantasy novel, her brow furrowed with concentration. Leo, 6, was the epicenter of the family's current challenge. He was bored, restless, and deeply fascinated by the moving walkway, which he treated like a personal treadmill. "Leo, honey, come back. You have to sit with us. We're boarding soon," Elena said, her voice calm but firm. "But it's moving," he protested, his light-up sneakers flashing red and blue. "So will the plane," a deep, quiet voice rumbled. Julian Washington looked up from his phone, a small, tired smile on his face. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, the blue light of his screen illuminating the deep lines of concentration around his eyes. He was in the middle of a text exchange that could sway a critical infrastructure vote. "And tell the whip's office that if they want the 9th District's support, they need to guarantee the funds for the South Side Tunnel project. No guarantees, no vote. Period." He clicked his phone off and slid it into the pocket of his worn blazer. He looked like a college professor, maybe a lawyer, unassuming, dressed in comfortable slacks and a polo shirt for the flight. He was deliberately anonymous. In D.C., he was Congressman Washington. In Chicago, he was just Julian, a dad trying to get his family home. The gate agent, a flustered man named Marcus, finally clicked on his microphone. "We are now ready to begin boarding Flight 1282 to Reagan National. We apologize for the delay. We will begin with our first-class passengers and those needing special assistance." "That's us, kids," Julian said, standing and stretching. He gestured for Elena to go first with Leo, while he and Maya handled the carry-ons. As they approached the podium, they were met not by Marcus, but by the lead flight attendant, a woman in her late 40s with blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. Her lipstick was a slash of perfect, unmoving crimson. Her name tag read, Brenda. Brenda Jenkins was having a terrible day, which was, in her opinion, compounding a terrible month. A messy divorce and a younger, faster generation of flight attendants were making her feel obsolete, and that obsolescence was calcifying into resentment. She saw her cabin not as a service, but as a kingdom, and she was its absolute monarch. She looked at the Washington family, her eyes scanning them from head to toe. She saw a black family. She saw 2 restless kids. She saw, in her mind, a problem. "First class?" she asked, her voice dripping with a saccharine skepticism that was sharper than any overt insult. "Yes," Elena said, holding out the 4 boarding passes for seats 2A, 2B, 2C, and 2D. Brenda took them, her eyes lingering on the passes as if expecting them to be forgeries. She glanced at Leo, who was now bouncing on the balls of his feet. "You will need to make sure he stays seated. This is a full flight, and the front cabin is for passengers who wish to work." Elena stiffened. "He's 6. We'll do our best." "See that you do," Brenda replied. She then turned her attention to their carry-ons. "Are all of those within regulation size? You're only allowed 1 carry-on and 1 personal item each." "Yes, they are," Julian said, stepping forward slightly. His voice was neutral. They're the same bags we flew in with on this airline 2 days ago. Brenda's eyes narrowed. She was used to people talking back, but she didn't like his tone. It was too calm. She hated calm. It meant she wasn't in control. "We'll be the judge of that," she said. She grabbed a tag from her counter. "We may have to gate check these. The overheads are very small on this aircraft." "It's an Airbus A321, Maya said suddenly, looking up from her book. "The overheads in first class are actually 15% larger than on the 737s. They'll fit." Brenda's head snapped toward the 10-year-old. The audacity. She was about to reprimand the child when Marcus, the gate agent, intervened. "Ma'am, they're fine. They're priority passengers. Please go ahead. We need to get this flight out." Brenda shot Marcus a look that could curdle milk, then tore the boarding passes in half with a vicious zip. She handed them back to Elena without a word, her crimson lips pressed into a thin, furious line. As the Washingtons walked down the jet bridge, Julian put a reassuring hand on Elena's back. She was vibrating with anger. "Let it go, Elle. She's just miserable." "That's no excuse," Elena whispered back. "She looked at us like we were dirt." They didn't see Brenda turn to her younger colleague, a new flight attendant named Sarah Davis. Sarah, watching the family go, had a worried look on her face. "Wow," Sarah muttered. "She was a little intense." Brenda finished her paperwork and snapped her binder shut. "You're new, Sarah. You'll learn. You see a family like that, in those seats, with kids bouncing off the walls? I guarantee you, they are going to be troublemakers. The entire family, mark my words." She said it just loud enough for the last few first-class passengers behind them, a businessman in a suit, a young couple, to overhear. The businessman, a man named Robert Henderson, frowned but said nothing. The seed was planted, the prophecy was spoken, and Brenda Jenkins was now actively looking for a reason to prove herself right. The cabin of the A321 was a reprieve from the terminal's chaos, but the tension was palpable. The Washingtons settled into their seats, Julian and Leo in 2A and 2B by the window, Elena and Maya across the aisle in 2C and 2D. The seats were spacious, leather, a stark contrast to the judgment they'd received at the gate. Julian immediately pulled out his laptop, needing to review the bill he was supposed to be debating tomorrow. Elena was helping Maya find the headphone jack, and Leo, for the moment, was placated by the promise of an animated movie. Brenda Jenkins was in her element. She moved through the first-class cabin with a rigid, practiced grace, her smile a terrifying baring of teeth. She was charm incarnate to the elderly white couple in row 1. She laughed at a joke from Mr. Henderson in 3B. But when she passed the Washingtons, the temperature dropped. Sarah, the younger FA, came by to offer pre-departure beverages. "Ma'am, sir, can I get you something to drink before we take off? Orange juice? Water?" "I'll have a water, please," Elena smiled, grateful for the normal, human interaction. "Can I have apple juice?" Maya asked. "You bet," Sarah said, smiling. She turned to Julian. "Sir?" "Just water is fine, thank you, Sarah," Julian said, not looking up from his screen. Brenda, observing this from the galley, felt a fresh spike of irritation. He didn't even look up. The disrespect. And he'd used Sarah's name. Too familiar. They were all too familiar. Boarding finished. The main cabin door was sealed with a hydraulic thump. The captain came on the intercom, his voice a gravelly New England drawl, apologizing for the delay and promising a smooth ride. "Flight attendants, please be seated for departure," the captain concluded. Brenda and Sarah began their final sweep. Sarah moved down the main cabin. Brenda took first class. She stopped at row 2. Julian's laptop was still open. "Sir, I need all large electronic devices stowed for takeoff." "Of course," Julian said, beginning to power it down. "Just saving this." "Sir, now." He closed it. "It's closed, Brenda." He placed it in the seat back pocket. She stared at him, waiting for him to break eye contact. He didn't. He just looked at him, his expression placid. "Buckle," she snapped. She moved on. Just as she was about to sit in her jump seat, a small voice piped up. "Mommy, I have to go potty. Really bad." It was Leo. His face was crumpled in that way that signals an imminent, non-negotiable emergency. Elena unbuckled. "Oh, honey. Okay. Right now." It's an emergency, he whispered loudly. Elena looked up, her eyes pleading, toward the galley. Brenda was already on her feet, her face a mask of thunder. Ma'am, you cannot get up. The cabin is secure. We are taxiing. We haven't moved yet, Elena said, her voice strained. The jet bridge is still attached. He's 6. He can't wait. He should have gone in the terminal, Brenda said, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. The seatbelt sign is on. Everyone must be seated. It is FAA regulation. This was Brenda's favorite weapon, the FAA regulation. It was a shield she used to justify any command. Brenda, Julian said, his voice low and cutting through the tension. He had unbuckled his own belt. My son needs to use the restroom. It will take 30 seconds. We are not moving. Sir, if you do not sit down, I will have to inform the captain. You are interfering with a flight crew? This was the magic phrase, the one that carried the weight of federal law. Several passengers turned to stare. The Washington family was now officially a spectacle. Elena looked horrified. Julian looked for the first time angry. You would delay this entire flight, Julian said, which is already 2 hours late, over a 6-year-old child needing the restroom, when we are clearly still at the gate? I am responsible for the safety of this cabin. Brenda's voice rose, cracking with self-righteousness. I told you at the gate you needed to control your children, and now you're refusing to follow instructions. I knew it. I knew it. She then turned her back on them, marching to the front galley, and picked up the intercom phone to the cockpit. Elena looked at Julian, her eyes wide with disbelief. Julian, what is she doing? Before he could answer, Brenda turned back, the phone still in her hand. She pressed the hold button and addressed Sarah, who had just returned from the main cabin. Sarah, call the gate agent, Brenda commanded. I want them to come back. This family is being disruptive and non-compliant. I want them removed. A collective gasp went through the cabin. Removed? For a bathroom break? Removed, Julian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. Brenda, no, Sarah whispered, horrified. You can't do that. I am the lead on this flight, and I am not taking off with troublemakers in the front cabin, Brenda shouted. She hadn't meant to shout it. The word just exploded out of her, a release of all the day's frustrations. The word hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Troublemakers. Leo, sensing the catastrophic tension, burst into tears. I'm sorry, Mommy. I'm sorry. Elena's face crumpled, her anger replaced by a fierce, protective, maternal instinct. She scooped Leo into her lap. Shh, baby. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Julian Washington stood up. He was not a tall man, but at that moment he seemed to fill the entire cabin. He was no longer a professor, no longer an anonymous dad. He was something else. He did not shout. He did not gesticulate. He simply locked his eyes on Brenda Jenkins. Ms. Jenkins, he said, his voice so quiet, so clear that everyone strained to hear it. You will hang up that phone. You will open the lavatory door. My son will use the restroom. And then you will go sit down. Or I promise you, the only person leaving this aircraft will be you. Brenda was stunned. The sheer, unadulterated authority in his voice threw her off. Who was this man? Who do you think you are? She hissed, recovering. You are threatening me. That's a federal offense. Captain, she yelled, jabbing the button. Captain, I have a passenger in 2A who is threatening me. The entire cabin was silent. Mr. Henderson in 3B had his phone out, discreetly recording. The cockpit door buzzed open. The first officer, a young man named Ben, stuck his head out. What is going on out here? This man, Brenda pointed. He's non-compliant. His family is disruptive, and he just threatened me. This was it, the point of no return. Julian Washington looked at the first officer, at Brenda, at the watching passengers. He sighed as if a great weight had settled on him. He reached into the blazer he had hung on the hook, the one he'd almost gate-checked. He pulled out his wallet. Brenda's face twisted into a smirk. Was he going to try and bribe her? He didn't pull out money. He pulled out a small, leather-bound card case. He flipped it open. First officer, Julian said, his voice resonating with official power. My name is Julian Washington. I am the United States Congressman for the 9th District of Illinois. I am on the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. He held up the small golden eagle and the card identifying him as a member of the 119th Congress. I am flying home with my wife, Dr. Elena Washington, and my 2 children. Your lead flight attendant, Ms. Jenkins, has targeted my family with discriminatory and hostile behavior since we arrived at the gate. She has just in front of this entire cabin called my family troublemakers for requesting to use the restroom. She is lying about being threatened. She is, however, about to have a very serious problem with the Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Transportation, both of which my committee has oversight jurisdiction. He paused, letting the words land. Now, may my son please use the bathroom? Brenda Jenkins's face went from crimson red to a chalky, bloodless white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The crimson lipstick looked like a wound. The first officer's eyes went wide. He looked from the ID to Julian's face to Brenda's collapsing expression. Hell, he muttered. He looked at Leo, who was still crying. Yes, sir. Of course, sir. Right this way, son. Brenda, go to the galley. Now. Brenda, moving like a robot, her entire body shaking, stumbled backward into the galley and sank onto the jump seat, her mind a screaming void of white-hot panic. She had just called a sitting U.S. Congressman a troublemaker. The flight from Chicago to D.C. is short, barely 90 minutes in the air. For Brenda Jenkins, it was an eternity in hell. After the first officer, Ben, had personally escorted Leo to the lavatory and returned to the cockpit, he had a brief, panicked conversation with Captain Reynolds. Yeah, Captain, you're not going to believe this. The cabin door was sealed, for real this time, and the plane finally pushed back from the gate. As it taxied to the runway, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Leo was asleep on Julian's lap, exhausted by the emotional outburst. Elena was rubbing Maya's back, who was trying to read but kept glancing nervously at the galley. Julian himself was staring out the window, his jaw set, his laptop untouched in the seat pocket. Brenda did not emerge from the galley for the first 20 minutes of the flight. Sarah, the younger FA, was left to do the entire first-class service on her own. She was trembling, apologizing profusely for the lack of options. I am so sorry, Dr. Washington, Congressman, she whispered as she handed Elena a ginger ale. I don't know what to say. Is there anything at all I can get you? A hot towel? A snack basket for the kids? Sarah, it's not your fault, Elena said kindly, her doctor voice re-emerging. You've been wonderful, thank you. Julian turned from the window. Sarah, what Ms. Jenkins did was not just unprofessional, it was discriminatory. I appreciate your kindness, but I want you to know this is not over. I understand, sir, Sarah stammered, collecting her tray and practically fleeing to the relative safety of the main cabin. About 40 minutes into the flight, just as they crossed into Ohio airspace, Brenda emerged. Her face was still pale, but the panic had been replaced by a new, more dangerous emotion, defiant rage. She had, in that galley, convinced herself of a new narrative. She wasn't the aggressor. She was the victim. He had trapped her. He had used his power against her, a hard-working woman just trying to do her job. She was building her defense, and it started with reestablishing her dominance. She decided to proceed with the beverage service, as if nothing had happened. She pushed the heavy cart into the aisle and began, with exaggerated cheerfulness, at row 1. Can I get you another cocktail, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson? Of course. Then she arrived at row 2. She looked at Elena. Drink? She clipped. I'm fine, thank you, Elena said, her voice arctic. Brenda's eyes flicked to Julian. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. This infuriated her. He was supposed to look cowed or embarrassed. Instead, he just looked powerful. And you, sir? She asked, the title dripping with sarcasm. Nothing, Julian said. Brenda huffed and was about to move on when the plane hit a pocket of moderate turbulence. It was a solid jolt. Julian instinctively put his hand on Leo's head. Elena's ginger ale, which was sitting on the center console, sloshed, spilling a small amount onto the aisle carpet. It was perhaps 2 tablespoons of liquid. Brenda saw it as her opening. This is unacceptable, she shrieked, her voice cracking. Now you are creating a safety hazard. You are spilling liquids in the aisle. I knew you would be a problem. She grabbed a wad of cocktail napkins and, instead of bending to wipe it up, she threw them onto the spill at Elena's feet. Clean that up. Now. This was the final straw. This casual, demeaning public act of disrespect. After everything else. Elena Washington, the pediatric oncologist who held the hands of dying children, who fought insurance companies, who had faced down institutional racism her entire life to get where she was, snapped. Enough, Elena said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the cabin like a scalpel. Brenda froze. You did not just throw napkins at me, Elena said, standing up, her 5'4" frame suddenly seeming immensely taller. Ma'am, you need to sit down, Brenda began. You will be quiet and you will listen, Elena commanded, pointing a finger. You have, since the moment you laid eyes on us, treated my family with contempt. You questioned our right to be in these seats. You tried to take away our luggage. You threatened to have us removed from this plane because my 6-year-old child had to use the bathroom. And now you are throwing trash at my feet. I am the lead flight attendant. You are a bully, Elena interrupted, and I strongly suspect you are a racist. But you are, without a doubt, the most unprofessional and hostile airline employee I have ever encountered. Julian was on his feet now, standing beside his wife. He wasn't looking at Brenda. He was looking past her, down the aisle, at Robert Henderson in 3B, who was openly filming the encounter with his phone. He looked at the couple in row 1 who were staring, mouths agape. He was gathering witnesses. Ms. Jenkins, Julian said, his voice pure ice, you are to return to your jump seat. You will not speak to my wife or my children again for the duration of this flight. You will not serve this cabin. Am I clear? Brenda was shaking, caught between her ingrained belief in her own authority and the sudden, terrifying realization that she had crossed a line from which there was no return. The Congressman card was one thing. This public, unified condemnation was another. You can't talk to me like that, she stammered, but the conviction was gone. I just did, Julian said. Go. Now. Defeated, humiliated, and utterly exposed, Brenda Jenkins grabbed her cart, yanked it backward, and retreated to the galley, slamming the curtain shut behind her. For the rest of the flight, she did not come out. Sarah handled everything, her face a pale mask of apology. Mr. Henderson from 3B unbuckled his seatbelt, walked the few steps to row 2, and knelt in the aisle. Congressman Dr. Washington, he said in a low voice, my name is Robert Henderson. I'm a managing partner at K&L Gates. I've seen everything. From the gate, the troublemaker comment, the bathroom incident, and that. He nodded toward the still damp napkins on the floor. He pulled a business card from his jacket. I have a video of this last encounter. I am a 1,000,000-miler on this airline, and this is the most disgusting behavior I have ever witnessed. You will have my full support. Whatever you need, you call me. She cannot be allowed to get away with this. Julian took the card. Mr. Henderson, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. We all have to, Henderson said, his face grim. We all have to. As the plane began its final descent into Washington, D.C., passing over the very monuments Julian worked to protect, the cabin was silent. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed on. In the galley, Brenda Jenkins was on the phone to the cockpit again. But this time, she wasn't demanding. She was pleading. Captain, you have to understand. He used his position to threaten me. She got in my face. They were aggressive. I felt unsafe. I was the victim here. Captain Reynolds's voice crackled back, devoid of all warmth. Ms. Jenkins, you will remain in the galley until we are at the gate. You will not deplane until I tell you. A ground supervisor and airline security will be meeting the flight. Brenda's blood ran cold. Security? For her? The wheels touched down at Reagan National Airport with a jolt, mirroring the one that had just ripped through Brenda Jenkins' life. The fastened seatbelt sign pinged off. The familiar scramble of passengers, grabbing bags and jockeying for position began. But in first class, no one moved. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Flight attendants, disarm doors and cross-check, the captain's voice ordered. Sarah's voice, small and shaky, replied from the back. Aft door disarmed. There was a pause. Brenda, Sarah called over the intercom. Brenda, you have to disarm the forward door. A fumbling sound, then Brenda's voice deadened. Forward door disarmed. The jet bridge slowly, agonizingly connected to the aircraft. The thud and hiss of the door being unlocked sounded like a gavel falling. Brenda, as lead FA, was required to be at the door to bid passengers farewell. She stood there, her face a grotesque mask of forced pleasantry, her eyes darting nervously toward the cabin. The passengers from row 1, the elderly couple, scurried past her without making eye contact. Then came the Washingtons. Julian was holding Leo, who was now awake. Elena held Maya's hand. They stopped directly in front of Brenda. Brenda could not meet their eyes. She stared at a point on the bulkhead just past Julian's ear. Have a nice evening in Washington, she mumbled, the words tasting like ash. Julian and Elena said nothing. They simply walked past her, their silence a heavier condemnation than any words. As they stepped onto the jet bridge, they saw them. Captain Reynolds, a tall man with a silver crew cut and a chest full of ribbons on his uniform, stood with his arms crossed. Beside him was a man in a cross-country airline suit, his name tag identifying him as Dmitry Volkov, DCA Operations Supervisor. And beside him, 2 uniformed officers from the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, MWAA Police. Brenda stepped off the plane right behind them, saw the uniforms, and her professional mask shattered. Captain, what is this? I told you I was the one who was threatened. Captain Reynolds held up a hand, silencing her. He looked at Julian. Congressman Washington? I'm Captain Reynolds. This is Mr. Volkov. First, on behalf of Cross Country Airlines, I want to offer my profound apologies for what you and your family experienced on my flight. Thank you, Captain, Julian said, shifting Leo on his hip. It was deeply unfortunate. Brenda, the captain said, his voice turning to steel, tell me exactly what happened, from your perspective. This was her chance, her last chance. Brenda, summoning all her self-righteous indignation, launched into her prepared speech. Captain, this family was non-compliant from the moment they boarded. The children were uncontrolled, they refused to stow their electronics, and when I tried to enforce FAA safety regulations for takeoff, he, she pointed at Julian, stood up, got in my face, and threatened me. He used his position, she spat the word, to intimidate me. And then his wife, she gestured at Elena, she got up and threatened me too. I felt unsafe. I was harassed the entire flight. It was a compelling story, a story of a powerful man abusing a working-class woman. It might have even worked. But then Mr. Henderson stepped off the plane. Excuse me, Captain? Henderson said, walking straight into the circle. That is a complete and utter fabrication. I am Robert Henderson. I was in seat 3B. I witnessed the entire exchange. Brenda's face fell. Sir, this is an official airline matter. I'm making it my matter, Henderson said, his voice booming in the narrow corridor. Ms. Jenkins called that family troublemakers at the gate in Chicago. Before they even stepped on the plane, she refused to let their 6-year-old son use the restroom while we were at the gate, threatening to have them removed. She escalated the situation, and mid-flight, she threw napkins at Dr. Washington over a tiny accidental spill. He pulled out his phone. And as for the threat, I have the entire encounter on video. The only person being threatening was Ms. Jenkins. Dmitry Volkov, the supervisor, looked at Captain Reynolds. The captain's face was grim. Captain, Julian said quietly, this isn't just about my family. This is about a pattern of behavior. I'm sure we're not the first. The captain nodded slowly. He turned to the other flight attendant, who had just deplaned. Ms. Davis, you were working the cabin with Ms. Jenkins. What is your report? Sarah Davis looked at Brenda, who was glaring at her, a look of pure venom. Then she looked at the police officers, at the captain, and at the Washington family. She took a deep breath. Sir, what Mr. Henderson said is true. All of it. Brenda, Ms. Jenkins. She told me at the gate she thought they would be troublemakers. I tried to tell her to calm down, but she just kept at them. The bathroom incident, it was awful. The congressman never threatened her. He just identified himself And the napkins. I saw it. I'm so sorry. I should have done something more. The silence on the jet bridge was absolute. The MWAA officers, who had been standing back, took a half step forward. Brenda Jenkins finally broke. "You bitch!" she shrieked at Sarah. "You lying traitor! They're all lying. He's a politician. He's powerful. You're all just siding with him." "That's enough, Ms. Jenkins," Dmitry Volkov said, his voice sharp. "You are making the situation exponentially worse." Captain Reynolds stepped forward until he was inches from Brenda's face. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, his voice a low, lethal whisper, "you have embarrassed this airline. You have harassed passengers, and you have lied to your captain. You are a disgrace to that uniform." He turned to Dmitry. "She's grounded, effective immediately. Pull her credentials." "Grounded?" Brenda's shriek turned into a desperate squeak. "Grounded! You can't! I have a flight to Lisbon tomorrow. I'm lead purser. I've been with this airline for 22 years. 22 years and you haven't learned a thing about customer service or basic human decency," Reynolds shot back. Dmitry stepped up. "Brenda, give me your badge, now." "No, this is not fair," she cried, tears of rage and panic streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "Ma'am," one of the MWA officers said, his voice gentle but firm, "please hand over your credentials to the airline supervisor. We don't want to make this a police matter, but you are obstructing airport operations." Defeated, she ripped the plastic ID and wings from her blazer and shoved them into Dmitry's hand. "You'll be hearing from my union," she spat. "I'm sure we will," Dmitry said, pocketing the badge. "You are to report to the chief pilot's office at Dulles tomorrow at Oro 900 for a full review. Now the officers will escort you out of the secure area. Go home, Brenda." Brenda looked at the Washingtons, who were watching, their faces somber. She looked at Julian, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost tangible. You did this," she seethed. "You ruined my life." "No, Ms. Jenkins," Julian said, his voice heavy with a sad finality. "You did this to yourself." Brenda Jenkins, flanked by the two officers, was walked down the jet bridge, not as a proud flight attendant, but as a humiliated liability. The Washingtons, led by a deeply apologetic Dmitry, were escorted the other way, toward the terminal, the flashing lights of the Capitol visible just across the river. The next morning, the executive floor of Cross Country Airlines headquarters in Atlanta went into 5-alarm fire mode. "A congressman?" bellowed Mark Donovan, the CEO, into his speakerphone. "A congressman from the Transportation Committee? Are you telling me we had a flight attendant harass a sitting member of the House T&I Committee and his family?" The head of in-flight services, a woman named Cynthia, was pale. "Mark, the report from Captain Reynolds is, it's bad. We have 3 separate statements, the captains, the co-pilots, and the other FAs, all corroborating the family's story. We also have a formal statement from another passenger, a K&L Gates lawyer named Henderson, who calls it the most blatant case of racial profiling and passenger abuse he's ever seen." "Where is she now?" Donovan demanded, pacing his office. "She was supposed to be at the Dulles office for a review at Oro 900. She never showed. Her union rep called, screaming about unjust suspension and passenger intimidation. He's claiming the congressman flashed his credentials and threatened her job." "He didn't have to threaten her job," Donovan roared. "She did it for him. Get me her file. Now. I want every commendation, every complaint, every single piece of paper with her name on it." An hour later, the file landed on his desk with a thud, and the real story became clear. Brenda Jenkins was not a model employee. She was a problem employee. For 22 years, she had skated on the edge. Her file was littered with passenger complaints, nearly all of which carried a disturbing theme. 2018. Ms. Jenkins was hostile and rude to my family during pre-boarding, asking if we spoke English when my wife asked a question. 2019. Flight attendant B. Jenkins refused to hang my suit coat in the first-class closet, saying it was full, though I was the first to board. She then hung the coat of a white passenger 2 minutes later. 2021. Filed a disruptive passenger report on a young man who was, in my opinion, just nervous. She seemed to target him because he was of Middle Eastern descent. 2023. Refused to heat a bottle for my infant, saying it was against policy, a policy I know for a fact does not exist. She was lovely to the family in the row ahead of us. Complaint after complaint. They had all been handled by mid-level HR managers. Brenda had been counseled. She had been retrained. She had written apologies, but she had never been seriously disciplined. The union was strong, and she was senior. Firing her would have been a long, expensive fight. Until now. She harassed a lawyer and a congressman, Cynthia said, her voice hollow. She gave us the witnesses and the evidence to fire her 10 times over. Get legal in here, Donovan ordered. I want her terminated. Today. For cause. Gross misconduct, passenger harassment, discriminatory behavior, and lying to a flight officer. I want it ironclad. The union can scream all they want. We have her dead to rights. And I'm calling the congressman personally. Meanwhile, Brenda Jenkins was at her condo in Reston, Virginia, furiously chain-smoking on her balcony, leaving increasingly hysterical messages for her union rep. David, you have to fight this. They're taking his word over mine. It's because he's a man. It's because he's a politician. It's reverse discrimination. They ganged up on me. That little intern, Sarah, she stabbed me in the back. I'm going to sue them all. Her phone rang. It wasn't David. It was an unknown number from Atlanta. She snatched it up. Hello? Is this Ms. Brenda Jenkins? Yes, who is this? This is Alan Bishop from Cross Country Airlines Corporate Legal. I am calling to inform you that, following a full review of the incident on Flight 1282 and an examination of your complete service record, Cross Country Airlines is terminating your employment, effective immediately. Brenda's cigarette fell from her fingers. Terminating? You can't. I have my union. Your union has already been notified, Ms. Jenkins. The voice continued, cold and dispassionate. A formal letter of termination detailing the specific causes, including but not limited to passenger harassment, failure to comply with company conduct policy, and providing false statements to a superior officer, is being sent to your address via certified mail. You will receive information on COBRA and any eligible payouts from HR. Do not attempt to use your airline credentials, as they have been permanently deactivated. Goodbye. The line clicked dead. Brenda stared at the phone. 22 years. Her seniority. Her travel benefits. The only good thing to come out of her divorce. Her pension. Her identity. Gone. In less than 24 hours. She sank to her knees on the balcony, the full, crushing weight of her actions finally landing on her. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair. It was their fault. The kids, the wife, and him. That calm, quiet, unassuming man in 2A. He had taken everything from her. She let out a raw, guttural scream that echoed across the manicured lawns of her condo complex. The story did not break in the press. Congressman Washington, when he received the personal call from CEO Mark Donovan, was gracious but firm. Mark, I appreciate the apology, and I'm relieved your company took decisive action, Julian said from his office in the Rayburn House office building. But let me be clear, I'm not seeking headlines. My family, especially my children, were humiliated, and I don't want to put them through it again. Absolutely, Congressman. Your privacy is paramount, Donovan said, sweating. But, Julian continued, I am concerned about the pattern. Your head of in-flight services confirmed to my chief of staff that Ms. Jenkins had a history of targeting minorities, and your airline counseled her. You knew. You let a known problem persist until she harassed someone you couldn't ignore. Donovan was silent. I don't want a public apology, Mark. I want action. I want to see a comprehensive, top-to-bottom, mandatory retraining program for all your in-flight staff on implicit bias, de-escalation, and cultural sensitivity. And I want a report on my desk in 6 months detailing its implementation. Otherwise, the T&I committee might just find a reason to open an inquiry into cross-country's compliance with non-discrimination policies. The threat was veiled, but the message was clear. Yes, Congressman, Donovan said, his voice weak. You'll have it in 4 months. Good, Julian said, and hung up. For Brenda Jenkins, the nightmare was just beginning. Her termination was swift and brutal. She was blacklisted. In the tight-knit world of aviation, a for cause firing for passenger harassment is a death sentence. No other major airline would touch her. Even the budget carriers wouldn't return her calls. She hired a lawyer with the last of her savings and filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against cross-country airlines. She also named Julian Washington personally for tortious interference and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit was a disaster. Cross-country's legal team, armed with Brenda's own file, countersued for her breach of contract. But the real death blow came during discovery. Robert Henderson, the lawyer from 3B, gleefully provided his video. The audio was crystal clear. It captured Brenda's shriek, "This is unacceptable. Clean that up now." It captured Elena's calm, firm dressing down. It captured Brenda's complete loss of professional control. Sarah Davis, the younger FA, who had been promoted to lead flight attendant 6 weeks after the incident, gave a tearful, detailed deposition. Brenda's case was built on sand. Her lawyer, seeing the mountain of evidence, advised her to drop the suit. "Brenda, they will countersue you into oblivion for legal fees. The video it's indefensible. And your own service record, we can't spin this. You have to walk away." She refused. "It's a lie. He's a powerful politician." The case went before a judge for summary judgment. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Esther Cohen, watched the video, read the depositions, and reviewed Brenda's service file. She issued a summary judgment in favor of cross-country airlines and Congressman Washington, dismissing all of Brenda's claims with prejudice. In her ruling, she wrote, "Plaintiff's case is not only frivolous, it is an offense to logic. The evidence overwhelmingly shows that Ms. Jenkins was the sole and continuous aggressor in this unfortunate incident. Her claims of reverse discrimination and intimidation are frankly absurd. This is not a case of a powerful man abusing his station. It is a case of a woman in a position of authority abusing hers." Case dismissed. Brenda was ordered to pay cross-country's legal fees, a sum of $75,000. She was ruined. She lost her condo. Her pension was gone. Her 401k was drained to pay the lawyers and the judgment. Within a year of that fateful flight, Brenda Jenkins, the 22-year veteran and queen of the cabin, was bankrupt and filing for unemployment. 18 months. That's how long it took for the last vestiges of her old life to disappear. The sky was gone. The sleek uniforms, the exotic layovers in Lisbon and Rome, the sense of superiority, all gone, replaced. The 10 p.m. shift at the 24-hour stop-and-go convenience store was a special kind of purgatory. It was located on a bleak stretch of highway just outside Dulles International Airport. A cruel final irony. She spent her nights under the humming, sickeningly bright fluorescent lights, listening to the chime of the door, the rumble of trucks, and the whir of the hot dog roller. Her name tag was no longer a set of polished silver wings. It was a cheap magnetic plastic rectangle that just said, Brenda. Her uniform was a polyester red vest that smelled faintly of nacho cheese. She was ringing up a pack of cigarettes for a trucker when the bell chimed. A man in a dark suit walked in. He was on his phone, his voice low and professional. "No, Mr. Speaker, I'm just landing at Dulles now. I'll be at the caucus meeting first thing in the morning." "Yes, I agree. We hold the line on the budget. Absolutely. I'll see you then." He hung up, walked to the refrigerated section, and pulled out a bottle of water. He walked to the counter and placed it down. Brenda's hands froze on the register. Her heart stopped. The face, it was older, maybe a little more tired. The lines around his eyes were deeper, but it was him, Congressman Julian Washington. He didn't even look at her. He was checking his phone again, scrolling through emails. She stared at him, a wave of hot, dizzying nausea washing over her. Here he was, the man who had ruined her life, the man who had taken everything. He was here buying a $2 bottle of water on his way to run the country. And she was here. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely scan the bottle. "Beep. $2.19, she whispered. Her voice was a dry croak. He pulled a $5 bill from a slim money clip and handed it to her, his eyes still on his phone. She fumbled with the change. Her mind was screaming. "Say something. Tell him what he did to you. Make him see you." But what could she say? "You cost me my job. He'd just say, "No, you did." And he'd be right. She dropped the change into his open palm. He didn't even register her face. To him, she was a polyester vest, a pair of hands, a function. She was no one. "Thank you," he said, polite, distracted. He picked up his water. "Have a good night." He turned and walked out the door. A black government Suburban was waiting for him at the curb. The door opened, he got in, and the car pulled silently away, disappearing onto the highway. Brenda Jenkins stood alone in the empty, overly bright store. The only sound was the hum of the freezer and the gentle clink, clink, clink of the hot dogs turning on their rollers. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the door. She saw a tired, middle-aged woman in a stained red vest, her hair limp, her eyes dead. The hard karma wasn't a lightning bolt. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was this. It was the crushing, suffocating, absolute insignificance of her new reality. He was moving on, shaping the world, and she was left behind, under the fluorescent lights, with nothing but the consequences of her own hate. The bell on the door chimed again. A new customer. Brenda turned, her face blank, and waited for the next transaction. And that's the sound of karma hitting back. Not with a bang, but with the quiet, humiliating beep of a cash register. Brenda Jenkins thought her uniform and her title gave her the power to dehumanize a family. But she learned that true power lies in character, not in a name tag. Congressman Washington and his family didn't set out to destroy her life. They simply refused to let her destroy theirs. Her prejudice was a boomerang she threw with all her might, and it just took 18 months to fly back and hit her right between the eyes. What do you guys think? Was her ultimate fate justified? Have you ever seen someone so spectacularly ruin their own life over their own bigotry? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a powerful reminder that respect is free, but disrespect can cost you everything. If you love this story of drama and hard justice, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. We drop stories like this every week, and you don't want to miss the next one. Thanks for listening.